Albion. As we get started, let's pray. God of love, we thank you for the gift of your Spirit with us this day. We know that you call us to be your agents and your faithful people to work for the healing of this world. And we thank you for folks like Lauren and Albion and so many others that make such a meaningful difference in our community. We thank you for bringing her to us this day, and we pray that you would grant us hearts that are open and willing to learn about how we might help. I pray all this in Christ. Amen.
I think that I've met some of you, but this is what my face looks like. You just know me from here up. So I'm going to try to. So I'm Lauren Barker. I'm with Albion Celebration Center. So a little bit about Albion and our mission. We are a local nonprofit, and our mission is to prevent domestic and sexual violence and to empower victims through advocacy, education, supportive services, and collaborative partnerships. Andy thought this would be a really good time for some of you to get to know me a little bit. That's my role at Albion. So again, I'm Lauren Barker. This is my husband, Philip Barker. You may have seen him in the sound booth. He helps run that, usually during second service. These are my babies, Dax and Harmony. They're my twins. This is when they were about a year old, so they're a little bigger now, but they turned 5 in May. So those are our kiddos, and they love going here too. So a little bit about my journey. I did not start off in social services. I actually started in film and television. So I grew up here in Evansville and graduated from Harrison. So there's more. Then I went to college in Florida, where I received my degree in film and media production. From there, I moved to Chicago for a little bit, and then decided to make the big leap to Los Angeles, where I like to say I survived for 6.5 years. It's a tough city to live in, but so yeah, I worked on different projects through MTV, shows like The Real World, Bad Girls Club, The Kardashians, and then I also worked with some entertainment for a little bit too. So yeah, that's in a nutshell part of my journey. So why Albion? Why did I go from TV and movies to working with survivors? It's kind of a long story, but I moved back to Evansville mainly for health reasons. It is not a good place in LA with the smog. If any of you have ever visited, the air quality is horrible. And I have some lung problems. So the only option was to move to higher elevation, which was in Malibu, which is extremely expensive. Could not afford to do that. And at the same time, my parents had gotten custody of all 3 of my nephews, one of which was a newborn. They weren't getting any younger, and they needed help. So ultimately decided to move back to help my family. And in the process, decided I didn't want to go into working for the news. The hours sucked, the pay was even worse. It's not a family-friendly kind of career, so I had to kind of look inward and decide, what are my other passions, what do I like to do, and helping people. I like to make a difference, hopefully, to give my skills and my time to others. I find that fulfills me. So I kind of jumped into the nonprofit world, and the rest is history. So that's where I got into Albion. So these are some sad but true statistics. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men in the U.S. will experience rape, physical violence, and/or stalking by an intimate partner. 1 in 15 children are exposed to intimate partner violence each year, and 90% of those kids are eyewitnesses to this violence. So we have stats like this that we put into a lot of the presentations that we do to help spread awareness. But recently, I had an even stronger connection to it with something that happened with my family that I was going to share with you all today. So So this is baby Cameron. He is my cousin's first child. Super lovey baby. As you can tell, I'm like totally about him. Super cute. This is my aunt. Cameron's just a very, lovey, happy all the time, running around, very much as kiddo. His mom was a single mother and going to school, working a job, trying to just get by. She met a gentleman. There was kind of some quick involvement, or things that we call red flags in our realm, that were concerning to me. I never got to meet him at first. It seemed like a couple of months. There is his laughing little nugget. A couple of months went by, and they were moving in together. So it was like, okay, but also like, let's be careful. And then it just seemed to escalate from there. We started seeing things like this. I don't know if you all can see this, but there are pictures. He has a black eye. There's a cut under his eye, and then the question, what happened? There always seemed to be an excuse. Oh, he fell down, or that's just how kids are. There was always a reason, and then we started seeing things like this, where he became almost like a shell of the kid that he was. Very quiet, very withdrawn. When we would FaceTime, because they don't live here, they live in Alabama, he was just he wasn't himself. And you just saw his whole demeanor change. So again, those are red flags to me, to try to talk to mom and see what's going on. But of course, was told, no big deal, he's just going through a phase, and things like that. December 11th, I was making dinner at home, and got a phone call that literally brought me to my knees. It was my cousin, and she said that we needed to pray for baby Cameron, because they were waiting on light flight to arrive at the emergency room. And of course, I'm like, what happened? What's going on? The story that was told was that she was at work. Baby Cameron was with her then husband, they did get married, and he was playing and just fell out. He fell out, wasn't breathing. He did not call 911. He took the child to his mother's house, which was right across the street, and then they went to the hospital. It was there that his heart had stopped several times. They had to put him on life support while they awaited the helicopter to get there. There was a lot of details at the moment that we got the call that didn't make sense, and I had a really bad feeling that something had happened. So in the hours after that, and I'm sorry, I was supposed to give a warning. Hopefully you can see that. These are graphic, so if you need to step out or this is triggering, feel free to do so. But this was him right after life flight. He was still not responding when he did arrive at the hospital. He was on, obviously, life support. He had a lot of bruising on his body, on his head, and things just did not look good. So during the MRI scan, they were actually able to see that he had a significant brain bleed, and a pediatric specialist then determined that the cause of that was severe head trauma that had happened prior to his ICU arrival, meaning that somebody caused him harm. DCS was obviously notified, and that's kind of where his journey began. My cousin was removed out of the room. She was questioned along with husband who was with him when the incident occurred. Thankfully, his biological father stepped forward to take custody of him along with my aunt and his grandma to give him some normalcy, but also to make sure that nothing like this ever happened to him again. When I got the call, I definitely went through all the emotions. Sadness, obviously, but a lot of anger. I wanted to drive to Alabama as quickly as I could and seek justice on my own. In my head, I had plans. I had never experienced that on that level personally. I had talked with parents in the emergency room that had gone through this. We had, we've done one-on-ones with secondary victims, but never really fully understanding the range of emotions. But now I get it, and it's terrifying to feel like you can't do anything and like you should have done something all at once. We'll come back to it. Here we go. So a couple days after that, we finally got the phone call that baby Cameron woke up. So that was a really good sign. I don't know if you can tell by the picture that his pupils are 2 different sizes. That is from the head trauma. He needed to go through a lot of therapy and things to help him get back to, speaking and just communicating again. So this is actually baby Cameron today, well at Christmas. He's a happy, healthy baby boy now. Again, he was in a stable home where people that are safe. But the effects of what happened to him will definitely impact him for the rest of his life. He can't start therapy yet because he isn't speaking. So once he does start talking and getting words, he will definitely have some therapy to do. He's still very scared of men in general. He cowers down. He still remembers, even though he's little, it definitely impacted him. So he is definitely part of my why in the work that I do, and hopefully making a difference so that kids like him don't have to go through things that he went through. So what is Albion? So our namesake was actually, Albion Sells Bacon is a person, was a person. We do not sell bacon. A lot of people ask us that. There is no bacon. She was an Evansville native, highly praised for social reform in the 20th century. And she's best known for her progressive stance on housing reform, as well as her work as an unpaid lobbyist for the Indiana General Assembly, which resulted in the passage of statewide housing legislation in 1913. So because of her legacy and commitment to advocating for others, Albion Sells Bacon was formed in 1981. We started with a 6-bedroom house that was a shelter for those who were fleeing domestic violence. So we've definitely grown since then from that tiny house, but I'm still growing today.
Who was the first director?
Whoa, who was that? Who was the first director? I don't know. I have only been there 5 years now, so I wasn't there. Donna Kennedy. This is one of my bosses, so So who do we serve? So we provide services to anybody, and that includes all genders. So a lot of people think that we are a battered women's shelter. Take that out of your vocabulary. That is not what we are. We do an emergency shelter, but again, we serve all genders, so it's not just for women. We serve anybody who's been impacted and affected by sexual violence, as well as human trafficking. And our services are confidential, they're free of charge, and we're 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So even on holidays, people can call, and we will chat with them. We also serve 11 counties in the state of Indiana, so we're not just Vanderbilt County, we serve quite a bit. Do you have a question?
Yeah. Do the police bring these ladies and people's families in, or can they just walk in?
Well, they can call, and usually with law enforcement, they will call us ahead of time. We've had people show up to our door, and we'll do an assessment at that time. For the emergency shelter, there was a couple questions that we go through. We do not provide services or shelter for somebody who is experiencing homelessness. It needs to be an emergency situation related to domestic violence or sexual assault. Usually law enforcement's pretty good about determining that, but if they don't meet the criteria, we definitely try to reach out to our other service providers to get them a place to stay. So yeah, they do give some criteria. So some of the services that we provide, so we have advocates on staff. They provide legal advocacy, and what that means is they can help file a protective order if they need. They can go into the court, just be somebody there to hold a hand, or maybe they don't have anybody to go with them. They're there to help support them and empower them. We also have the crisis advocacy and crisis hotline. What that means is, so for the crisis response, we'll actually go to any safe, public, neutral location to meet with a survivor, one-on-one to safety plan or offer resources that they might need. Sometimes it's usually in a hospital setting, but we may be the only person that they can call, or maybe they don't feel comfortable calling anybody else. So besides the doctor and the nurse in that room, we may be the only other person. So we take that very seriously. The hotline, again, 24/7. Our advocates are there to answer calls. Usually when they call, it's that they're in crisis and they're not sure what to do. So we'll kind of go through the steps. Usually safety planning is a big thing. If they're trying to flee a relationship and they don't know how, just talking them through things helps a lot. Emergency shelter. Right now we are spacing because of COVID, so we're doing every other room. But it's one family per room. So it's kind of limited us on how many rooms we have available. But we've seen that it's working still. I don't think that we've reached max capacity yet. So we still have that. Primary prevention. So our primary prevention person goes out to the schools and they teach a program called Safe Gates, and it's an evidence-based curriculum that talks about healthy relationships, boundaries, consent, things like that, with young ones, middle school and high school, so that hopefully they can plant the seeds of preventing violence before it starts. Support groups, we have a sexual assault survivor support group and a domestic violence survivor support group. We are hoping to have those back in person soon, but right now those are via Zoom. So those are available to survivors. And then we do presentations and training. So we have ones that we can cater, kind of like the one we did today. Cater it to whatever the audience would like to hear about. And then we also have ones on specific topics if there is something that is of interest. So impact, this is from 2021. These are some of our stats on services that we provided. So we provided 3,567 nights of safe shelter to 157 adults and 108 children. 2,838 people were assisted by our non-residential program, and then 9,166 calls were answered by our 24-hour crisis hotline. So I know the calls went up between 20 and 21, and then I believe the non-residential assisted went up as well. So you can kind of see the impact of COVID on that one. So how can you help? We need a lot of help. We need financial help to keep going, to be able to provide these services to survivors. But we also need help in our building. Our emergency shelter has seen a better day. It's over 30-something years old. It needs some love and some updates, and that's what we're kind of looking at right now. This is not from The Shining. This is from our shelter. This is where the emergency shelter rooms are, and it looks kind of scary. And it looks, very sterile. We're working on the painting, but we would like to get, this is like an tile flooring, we'd like to get some nice like wood floors to replace that, to make it more welcoming and inviting. Some other things that we need are new windows. It's hard to see in this picture, but this is like a wooden frame. Some of the pieces are broken. It's like a slide open window, and it's real janky. So a lot of the rooms, almost all the rooms, I think, have this same window, and they definitely need replaced for better insulation as well. But that's another thing that we're looking to do. And then this is just a picture in our shelter kitchen, which is kind of an open area concept. I don't know if you guys can see, but does anybody see something on the ceiling that might be missing? It's hard to see, I know. Anyway. No, there's light bulbs. They're just not on, but there are.
Sprinkler system.
Yeah. There's no sprinkler system. So I guess because of coding back in the day, it wasn't required that we had a sprinkler system, but if there is a fire in shelter right now, we have no sprinkler system, which is terrifying, but it's expensive to get done, so that's definitely another need that we have. Again, that's in the emergency shelter side, so that's the older side of the building, and we actually have a new wing. That one has a sprinkler system, and it's all updated, but
what's the address of your building?
I'm sorry?
What's the address of your building?
So as of right now, it's an unmarked location for safety reasons. We don't provide the address to the public, except for like if you're volunteering and things like that, but I can share that it is located in downtown Evansville. If you pull up, you will not find the actual number on the building even. It's just kind of made to blend in. But yeah, that's just for safety reasons. We may be going public with our address soon, because we've kind of added a business side to the building. We're not there yet, so. But if you need to drop by, let me know, and I can guide you there. So, yeah, so that is one of the other things that we need. And last but not least, your time. Volunteering with us. Some of you have come to paint the bedrooms, and we're so grateful for that. We have a lot of painting that we need to get done, but we have other volunteer opportunities as well, and are very open to ideas. So if you want to come in and do a class with some of the survivors in shelter, or you would like to cook a meal and donate that for those to have to enjoy things like that are so direct. We're open to that too. So, yeah. So, any other questions? Yes.
I guess just for the benefit of everybody here, Albion Fellows Bacon's father was a longtime Methodist minister at Trinity UNC, and she always said that the Methodist belief system really drove a lot of the work she did. And so when the center was formed, a lot of the local Methodist churches were behind that. So this is very appropriate as a Methodist church for us to support this.
Oh, I just recently found that out through Andy. I know that's probably really bad that I work there and did not know that, but yeah, he shared that with me and I love it. Yes.
If you had 9,000 emergency calls in a year, you surely have some way for these ladies or the survivors to get your telephone number.
Yes.
How do you advertise? How do you get the word out?
So social media is one of our biggest, which is kind of like my forte. So we post a lot on Facebook, Instagram, but we also have like cards that we pass out around town. We have posters and tear-offs that we put in places like the courthouse, local businesses, community boards, in bathrooms, at restaurants, at bars, things like that. We have gotten creative, I will say, in making sure that our information is out there and accessible, because there are some times where people don't want to take a card because they don't want to have it on them in fear that a user may find it. So, we try to make it as accessible as we can, but, doing print-offs and things like that, cards that they can put inside their shoe if needed. If we meet with people at the hospital, we've even gotten as creative as making little chat plastic that don't look like they're branded, that they have our phone number like in the barcode. So things like that. Yeah.
Share with us your yearly operating budget and where do you get the money?
Well, that would be a good question, and I don't know as far as budget goes, but, as far as where the money is going and how it's distributed, you know, our prevention team, again, going out to the schools and things like that, our advocates that work one-on-one with survivors. Our emergency shelter is a big portion of that. You know, nights of stay are not cheap. I think on average it's about $100 a night per person that we house. So that's a big chunk of our budget. We do have our annual gala coming up. It's in April, and that is kind of one of our bigger fundraisers for the year. And we talk about, you know, nights of service and people that want to sponsor that. There's a puppy. But yeah, it just depends. Yes.
Our budget's a little bit over $1 million a year. About $1 million, a
Okay.
little over $1 million. We get a lot of our funding resources are from grants from the Indiana Criminal Justice Institute, from the OBC, which is the Office of Victims of Crime, United Way, as well as a lot of foundations and public donations. What we're seeing this year, though, with COVID hitting, is that a lot of our grants are being decreased, like our VOCA grants, which fund pretty much our non-residential program. So we're taking a $90,000 cut this year. Because the funding, where the money came from were from court fines and fees, and with COVID, there weren't, I don't think, as many people during that 2-year span that were actually going through the criminal justice system, so that funding is going to drop significantly. So we really rely a lot on public support, public donations. There have been some COVID grants we've been able to apply for, but the next few years are going to be really tight.
Yeah, so with us being mainly grant funded, it's never guaranteed year to year if we're going to get those grants. So we're really trying to build up the support of the community to, you know, support us and keep us going and be able to provide those services for those in our community.
How long do the families stay there on the average?
So usually, kind of the max is about 45 days, but we go on a case-by-case basis. It just depends. Some of them are out sooner. A lot of them want to find transitional housing, so they want to be able to go from shelter into their own place. That is a barrier right now. There is not enough housing in Evansville for anyone who wants to rent, let alone a survivor who's trying to start over. So we take that into account, and we're not trying to kick somebody out when they're already down. But yeah, usually it's a 45-day max, but it just depends. You know, they may find somewhere else to go, a family friend to stay with, or sometimes their options are limited and they choose to go back to the abuser because they don't have another option. But our hopes, hopefully I'm not sharing too much, is that we can actually get into transitional housing. We're looking at a grant to make our way into that avenue and be able to provide that for survivors, understanding that emergency shelter isn't really the best route, and to be able to have places on site and contracted places off site so that they can rent would be just phenomenal.
On the eating type of stuff, I don't know why I think about this, but do they do their own cooking, or do you have?
So we supply like the canned goods, meat, cheese, milk, really all the ingredients they would need, but yes, they cook themselves, whatever meals. Sometimes they do like family style, where if there's a couple of them in shelter, they'll decide to, you know, one person cooks the meal and everybody kind of takes from that. And then we also have volunteers who will sign up for like a nightly meal where they either make it at home and bring it, or they can make it in-house in the kitchen and provide that, or they can just have it, you know, ordered and delivered. So yeah, there's somebody over here. Hold on just a second.
I was wondering about how much of the money that you receive, whether it, I guess it's a percentage of, well, how much of that goes to your staff and how much of the other percentage of that?
I don't do, that's That's a big boss question. I know.
Yeah, I was just wondering, because I know if you give to Samaritan's Purse and different things like that, they have a percentage, like 2% goes to operating staff and the rest goes to the people.
Gotcha. I will say, staff-wise, as far as paying staff, we're not at the capacity that we should be to be able to retain the quality of staff that we need. We're working on that, but I will say that majority of the funds do go to the agency, not so much the salaries.
Yeah, most of the grants pay for the salaries.
Yeah.
So you're mostly volunteer, your staff is mostly volunteer?
No, they're paid. Yeah, they're paid. It's just, as far as like hourly wage, it's very low. We're needing to bump that up, and just not because, you know, they're wanting it or they're greedy. These are the people that do the work. They're in the trenches. They are there every day. And like I said, a lot of them have degrees in this and need to be able to survive themselves. So it's definitely something that we're looking at. Yes.
Well, what percentage of your clients are involved with drugs?
Involved with drugs?
Right.
We don't track that. I will say most of the time, if there is someone who is using any sort of drug, it's to cope with the trauma that they've been through. So we look at it through a lens of, you know, that they've experienced something in their life. We're not there to judge them. We're not there to, you know, shame on you for using that. Most of the people that we encounter, like I said, if they've had drug use, it's because they've had trauma, and that is their way of either coping with it or numbing themselves from it. So we look at it from a victim standpoint rather than a shame thing. But yeah, we don't track that. That's not really a part of like our data entry or anything like that. Any other questions?
Do you have any statistics on how many go back to the spouse?
So on average, it takes at least 5 to 6 times before somebody actually leaves an abuser. Again, that's just because of, you know, financial reasons. Most of the time they've been restricted, they don't have funds, they don't have housing, maybe they have children, and they're not sure like how in the world they're gonna do this. So on average, it's about 5 to 6 times before they actually do that.
Say that again. You mean that they go through trauma 4 or 5 times before what?
Before they leave for good. So if somebody's in a domestic violence relationship and, you know, their spouse, their partner is the abuser, they will go back to living at the residence or being with that person as survival, not because they want to, but as a way to survive. Again, they may not have any money, and that's the only way that they're going to be able to get enough together to get their own place or, you know, childcare, things like that.
We also even saw that go up during COVID because a lot of people didn't want to go into a shelter during COVID because you didn't know, you were afraid of possibly being, you know, infected with it. So our shelter numbers went down a little bit during COVID. And it also was a lot more difficult for somebody to leave during COVID because they were completely isolated with their partners. With the stay-at-home orders, if they didn't have the finances, they couldn't escape this situation. And we kind of have to look at success differently than probably most agencies, because you would think it would be a success if somebody came to our program and they left that relationship and everything was wonderful and everything was healthy, but because of the dynamics, it's difficult for somebody to leave. You know, you love that person. You have children with them. It's not that easy to walk out the door. You know, maybe if they gave you a black eye on a regular basis or that first day, you might be able to leave. But if it's more emotional and verbal abuse, it's so subtle that you don't really realize you're being abused until you're completely committed in that situation. So for us, success may be this person left shelter, but they came back the next day. Or maybe not the next day, maybe 6 months later they came back again. They recognized those red flags a lot earlier. And I've been at Albion for a long time, and probably the best example I can give you is I had a lady I worked with. I think she was married for about 15 years. She finally was able to leave that person. Probably several years later, I saw her again, but this relationship, she was only in it for about 7 years. And then the next time we saw her, she recognized it in about 3 years. So for us, that's considered a success because she's starting to see those things and she's recognizing those red flags. So it's really difficult, I think, if you've never been through it, though, to understand why somebody doesn't leave that first time. But it's a process, and it's a safety issue as well. Most of the times, if somebody's murdered in a domestic violence situation, it's not while they're still living with that person, it's usually when they're separated. If you think about the media stories you've heard, it's not this couple's still married or still dating and still living together. That one person's lost control and their partner's left, and it puts them in even more danger than staying with the person.
So within your territory,
Uh-huh.
3 or 4 counties,
I love it.
how many people have gone through a trauma in a year?
Again, numbers, my friend. I'm not a lot.
One of your stats, did it say 3,000?
That was for, let me go back. Okay. So the 3,567 is the nights of safe shelter. So those are people who came into the shelter. And then the non-residential program had 2,838 people that were assisted. That just means the advocates that, as of right now, don't work in shelter, are not housed in the shelter program. They work one-on-one with people from the community. So you don't have to be in shelter to receive services. We have people that are, working adults who come in on their lunch break and just want to talk to somebody. That's what that number is.
But
What's
that's
the
just
base
you
there?
serve, not how many actually have. Right. That's just the number you serve. There's probably
Yeah, exactly.
multiples of that actually happen. Yeah.
Oh, there's more, yeah.
You do that with how many pay stacks?
We have, I think we have 30 staff right now.
And we're down about, we need to have at least 6
We need more.
We just had a hard time, as she mentioned before, with salaries. You know, our board is working on being able to get us to be competitive wage, but with the salaries and the trauma that the actual advocate takes on, you're talking day after day, people are kind of dumping their trauma on them and they're having to learn how to process that we have a hard time retaining staff. And a really difficult time when you can get a job at McDonald's for $15 an hour, and you're working your shift, maybe 8 to 4 and you're going home. When you're dealing with the type of work we do, you don't forget it when you go home. I mean, there are nights you're wondering if your client's going to be alive tomorrow. So it's really difficult. And that's the things our board's really working on. We're also looking at trying to get contracted therapists that'll be on staff not only for our clients, for our staff members as well. Because when you deal with this day in and day out, it affects you. And we have a wonderful staff, though. We have some great people, some very dedicated and passionate individuals that work at Albion.
Yeah, question.
And there's some other local organizations whose services you provide overlap.
Kind of. The YWCA does similar services to us. They don't provide the range of services as far as I know right now. So we are really the only ones that have that legal advocacy. Again, going to court with survivors. If there's any cases going on, court hearings, things like that, maybe prosecutor meetings, our advocates are there with them every step of the way. Again, protective orders, they'll help them file those. So really we are locally the only one that has the range of services. The YWCA, they have the safe shelter. I believe it's only for women though. Yes, they are only for women, whereas we serve all genders.
I was just gonna piggyback. They work with, we're all a big group. Out Parenting Time Center fits in the exchanges of the children. We do that. We take that on because that's a dangerous time when they're killed and living on.
Yeah.
And the other thing that we do, a lot of people don't realize the victims have their kids taken away from them. you're in this field, you can spot a victim, and you can spot the abuser. They're in the courtroom, they make their presence known to the victim, but your general public aren't aware of it, but you can tell the fear that comes on their face. And I've been able to reach out to this lady and say, you know, I've gotten the women, it's always been a woman, gotten them out of the room through the back corridor, and then Gina comes in and helps them. So we all work together.
Yes, very
And
much.
we can't do this alone.
If you haven't seen yet on Netflix is The Maid. It's a pretty, I've watched it, I usually don't watch things that have to do with domestic violence or sexual assault just because I live it every day. But it's a very realistic portrayal of what happens. I watched it because my sister kept calling me and asking me, is this really true? Do women actually get their kids taken away if they can't afford an attorney? Fortunately, it is true. And if you want to learn a little bit more about the dynamics, I thought it's probably one of the most realistic miniseries I've seen about the issue.
It's on Netflix. I have Netflix.
Has this expanded from any place besides Evansville?
You mean like services or?
The Albion, the big.
Our central location is here in Evansville. We only have one building, but we have remote advocacy, so we travel as well as doing Zoom calls and things. But yeah, we only have the one building. Any questions? Yeah. Okay. Maybe.
I can't. Well, it's not really a question. Can you, a friend, Albion really helped a friend of mine, and you touched on it a little bit with the court things and stuff, but can you expand a little bit on the fact about how domestic violence isn't only physical or sexual? Because I think a lot of times, like, her eyes were open, she wouldn't have considered herself a domestic violence victim, but it was emotional, psychological, financial, and that a new term is this coercive control. So if you're in a very controlling, very, like, you maybe haven't been hit and wouldn't think, oh, I can't call Albion, but Albion was like a lifesaver to her. So I just wanted to.
So financial abuse is one that doesn't get talked about a lot, but we see often. And that is where they're controlling all of the money, all of the assets, and that usually the bank account is only in their name. They may be working a job, but their paycheck is going into the account and they don't see anything. So if they do decide to leave, they have no access to that money. And you can imagine having to start over, not having anything. It also comes down to emotional abuse, and that is so, just because somebody isn't hitting you doesn't mean it's not abuse. There's manipulation, there's, name calling, belittling of someone, that constant tearing down and trying to make the other person feel like they are less than. A lot of them don't understand that is not acceptable and that they deserve better than that. But again, some people think just because they don't get a black eye or they didn't hit me that it's not abuse. It very much can be. It's just as harmful as the physical. There's also religious abuse, which isn't like the best thing to talk about right here, but people that have abusers that are very connected to the church will use that as a way to keep them in a relationship. You can't get divorced because God will look down on you. That's against what the Bible says. Or, they just use their religion as a way to keep that person kind of in line or in a relationship. And if they've grown up believing that or being taught that, they'll stay because they think that, they're going to go to hell if they, choose to leave this person or separate because they have children, things like that. So,
You're opening, what kind of positions do you need filled?
So we have part-time and full-time right now. We just did a restructuring, so, she remember the name of it. The full-time is
Survivor Services Coordinator. I was looking it up.
Yes.
I was looking at the whole thing because I
Provider Services Coordinator, there it is,
That's
full-time. Basically, that comes down to an advocate. That is somebody who's working one-on-one.
Are these social workers? Are they
Some of them are, some of them have degrees in other areas, but experience and expertise in that field, it just depends. So we're kind of we're a hodgepodge of all different kinds of skills and talents, and we come together and mesh beautifully, so.
The coordinator position will be supervising some of the, think of the new names, support services navigators. We just-
Survivor Services Navigator.
So those are the advocates that actually go out and work with all of the clients. And then the coordinator will be helping coordinate that program. They will be supervising the advocates, they will be doing the scheduling, as well as providing help with clients when needed. So we went from a non-residential program of 8 to where that's gonna double to, I think, 20, or not even double, it's gonna go to, I think, 23 advocates.
Yeah.
So before we were separated with people that only answered the crisis line and worked with the people in the shelter. And then we had another program that was non-residential, which worked with people who didn't need to live in the shelter, but actually needed services. So we're combining both of those to where we can have a much wider impact on dealing with the clients. So anybody that steps into our shelter, whether they come to shelter or they come to seeking services, provide the same type of services equally. So there'll be a lot more equity in what they're getting. Everybody will be cross-trained to do anything. So before, if you wanted a protective order, it was only kind of the day shift that could help you with it. Now you'll be able to get a protective order 24 hours a day. So all of the services, if somebody works, they're only available at 1 o'clock in the morning to meet with an advocate, we will actually have an advocate that can meet with them one-on-one at that time. So it's gonna make our services so much more accessible to clients, which is something that even COVID, I mean, as bad as COVID's been, it helped us think outside of the box. People that lived in Harrison County, which is right on the outskirts of Louisville, couldn't really attend our support groups because we used to only have them in Vandenberg. We've had them in Warwick and Posey in the past. Now they can do it virtually. And even when we start operating them in person again, we're going to have both of those components to where they can actually be in person or by Zoom, which also helps if you don't have transportation or if you don't have daycare, you'll be able to utilize the services as well. So we're so excited the direction that our agency's going in. It's going to do a lot for the victims that we serve.
Oh gosh.
Sorry.
Way in the back. Oh, hold on. Way in the back.
Sorry, I was a little late. I may have
Okay.
missed it. So could you explain why you said again that sometimes the victims, when they come forward, they can lose their children while they can't afford an attorney? What was that about?
So, I mean, sometimes obviously the abuser has access to more finances and can hire a better attorney. But when DCS is involved, they're going to look at both parties, especially if one is accusing the other, which we see often with false reporting from an abuser that, either mom or dad is doing this. Once that system and that phone call starts, it is a process to get their kids back. So, but I will say most of the time it's because they can afford to hire an attorney and the survivor cannot.
And sometimes it's a matter of, Lauren spoke about the financial abuse. If this victim chooses to leave her partner, she no longer has a place to live. And she doesn't have a place for her children to live. So sometimes the judges may opt, the other party has a home, they have a house, they're able to financially support this child. We've even had before where we've been told, once you're no longer living in the shelter, then you can go and try to get your kids back. Our facility is fine to have kids living there. It's safe, it's secure, it's nice.
Yeah.
But it's still just that stigma in society a lot of times. And that's where I thought May did a really good job of showing that, because I think it enraged people when they saw it, but it is so true.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned this earlier, but volunteer opportunities again for those that.
What do they look like?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you have available?
Painting, number one. We're trying to update that shelter wing in the building. We have the paint and supplies, we just need people to help us paint. We don't have a lot of direct things going on right now just because of COVID. The meals is another great way to volunteer and donate those. We have Letters of Hope, which is kind of like this box where you can write letters or make a picture or whatnot, and put it in the box, and then survivors in our shelter can go and pull those out when they need a pick-me-up. They need to see that people in the community believe them, support them, and, you know, to listen. So we have those. What else? We have the baking, these are all names I made up. Baking buddy bundles, which is for like birthdays or special occasions where you know, you can make a little bundle and donate that to shelters so they have access to the baking supplies they need to make a birthday cake or to celebrate a family member's, you know, graduation or something, things like that. But as far as other opportunities, if you go to that website, there's an application you can fill out, and then you can mark what areas of interest you have. And then I usually follow up with like a phone call to go over the different areas and then try to connect you to what would be good. What? Oh, the Conversation Hearts, because it's almost Valentine's Day. So on Facebook, if you have Facebook or go there, you can click on a link and purchase a Conversation Heart and send a little message to somebody you care about, somebody you love, and it will be incorporated into our digital Valentine video, so everybody can see your love. And it's like $5 for the little Conversation Heart, but it's a fundraiser that we're doing. So you need that for the Valentine. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
Crazy question. Are the victims always women? Could
No.
they be the men in times? And also a further question, if there are children involved, do they always fit with the, I mean, if you're going to take the mother, do the children automatically go with the mother? Or could there be?
So we've had instances where the mother is actually like the abuser, and the father has the kids and needs a safe place to go. That is real, it does happen. It doesn't happen as often because there is that stigma that, you know, men are not victims and, you know, there's no way. So when that does happen and they step out and they are bold enough to do that, it's not taken lightly. It takes a lot for them to step up and say, hey, like, I'm done being hurt. But yeah, they're completely able to have the kids as well. It doesn't need to just be with mom. Of course, if there's like DCS involvement, they kind of decide what happens there. But I mean, we've had you know, people identify as male in our shelter who have kiddos and you know, are great parents and are just there to have a safe place to go and hopefully try to get their own place and start anew. Yes.
You mentioned something about like cooking meals for your residents. Can you give like if you were to cook a meal, approximately how many people should you plan on feeding with that meal?
Yeah, so if you were looking to cook a meal, our suggestion is that you call a night or two ahead, so we can tell you what the census is because it changes every day. We can have, you know, a full house one day and then we're going to do the next. So usually a day or two, and we can kind of.
So like something that could just go in the freezer and be popped out for families.
You could do that, or it could just be like cooked and ready to go. I will say the cooked and ready to go usually tend to go better than them having to cook it. They get really, I mean, I think we all do. Like if you have food available, it's like, yes, I don't have to cook. But yeah, it's just nice, and it gives them a little less to worry about in the evenings, or you know, breakfast, lunch, whatever. You're moving. Okay.
I did want to thank, we did have, I think, 2 groups that came out from the simple. So they came out and painted for us, so we really appreciate it. You don't know how much it was rated on. So we really appreciate those who came out and painted and all the support that you've given us.
Lauren, first, thank you. Very, very important. I think you came with an organization that probably fits better with our business statement than what you all are doing, and it's great to save non-judgmental opportunities for folks. So thank you for this very much. And also, in the weeks ahead, we're going to talk about volunteer opportunities for Albion. As we continue our relationship with Albion and things come up, we'll talk about it in worship. Also, we're gonna be raising some resources for them and their facility in the weeks ahead too, so we expect more information about that. We always do some things, and so we're working on that. And I know Lauren's gonna be here and hang around afterwards, so if you have any more questions for her, she'd be happy to answer any questions. But thank you for being here, folks, and I guess let's pray before we go. God, we pause today, and we're mindful for the many people in this world that suffer from violence in all forms. And we pray that we might be a people to work for healing. And we pray especially for the advocates that work for healing in this world. We ask that you would help us as a congregation to see ways that we can participate in your reign, both in this community and the surrounding area. Thank you for Lauren, and Regina, and everyone that works with the folks that are affected by violence, and thank you for the folks here today, Lord. I ask your blessing upon us all in Christ's name.